She had no diploma, no office references, and a resume folder so thin it could barely stand on its own. The man sitting beside her had shined shoes, a father who managed an office downtown, and a folder thick enough to stop a door. Hana Marks was still waiting for her job interview when the outlet behind the space heater began to smoke. A thin gray ribbon crawling up the wall of the waiting room. The receptionist reached for the breaker, but Hana shot out of her chair and caught her wrist inches from the panel. "Reset that one more time," Hana said, "and everyone in this building may be running for the stairs." The room went silent. Three other candidates stared at Hana as if she had just destroyed her chance at the only office job she had found in 6 weeks. Maybe she had, but her 9-year-old son's controller inhaler needed refilling in 8 days, and she could not earn that money from inside a burning building. The receptionist pulled her hand away. "You're not maintenance?" "No," Hana said, "but I know what hot wiring smells like." A green service tag hung beside the panel, dated 3 days earlier and marked safe by Pike Electrical. The heater clicked off again, the lights dimmed, and the receptionist pointed at the tag as though the piece of paper mattered more than the smoke. "They already inspected it. This happens every morning." "That means it has nearly caught fire every morning." The man seated beside Hana gave a quiet laugh. His resume folder was thick, his shoes shined, and he had spent the last 10 minutes talking about the office his father managed. He looked at the voltage tester protruding from Hana's purse and said, "Maybe let the professionals handle it." Hana looked down at her own thin folder. No diploma, no office references, a warehouse job that had already taken her first paycheck for rent. She had every reason to sit back down and let somebody else be responsible. Then the outlet made a sharp popping sound. Hana unplugged the heater, switched off the warm breaker, and used the tester to confirm that the outlet was dead. The wall plate was discolored around one slot, and a dark crescent had formed beneath the plug. She loosened the plate just enough to expose the connection behind it. The insulation was scorched. The wire had been pushed into a device that was never meant to hold it safely, and the only new thing in the box was the clean white plate covering the damage. Whoever had signed the green tag had not repaired the hazard. They had hidden it. The interview room door opened behind her. Malik McBride stood in the doorway with his sleeves rolled above his forearms. Hana recognized him immediately. Billionaire founder, property developer, and the man whose company owned the occupied apartment building around them. He looked at the dark room, the frightened receptionist, and the job candidate kneeling beside an open outlet. "Tell me exactly what you just did," he said. Hana rose slowly. "I stopped your employee from energizing a damaged circuit." The polished candidate leaned forward. "She opened the outlet without permission." "Yes," Hana said, "because the breaker had already been reset 3 times. Malik's eyes moved to the green service tag. "It says this circuit was inspected Friday." "Then either the inspection was incompetent," Hana replied, "or the work on that invoice never happened." No one moved. Hana knew she had crossed the line between saving the room and accusing one of Malik's contractors. Her son's inhaler, her overdue grocery money, and the interview she had waited all morning for seemed to disappear behind the expression on Malik's face. He stepped closer to the outlet. "Are you a licensed electrician?" "No, sir. My uncle trained me as his helper before his health failed. I know how to recognize a dangerous connection and make it safe. I also know I cannot certify a repair." Malik studied her for another second, then turned to the sharp-eyed woman behind him. "Velma, photograph the tag. Preserve the service record. Call an independent electrician, and do not tell Pike we are checking their work." The man with the polished folder stopped smiling. Malik looked back at Hana. "Ms. Marks, were you here for the tenant services interview?" "Yes." "You're next." Hana glanced at the smoke stain above the outlet. "Mr. McBride, before we discuss software and phone calls, you should know something. A new wall plate was placed over an old, dangerous connection, and families are supposed to move into this wing before summer ends." Malik's expression changed. The burned outlet was no longer the biggest problem in the room. The smoke was contained. But the signed safe tag suggests the danger had been hidden on purpose. The interview lasted 40 minutes, but Hana never pretended to know what she did not know. When the woman with the tablet asked about 3 software systems Hana had never opened, Hana answered, "Show me once, watch me twice, and check me the third time." When Malik asked why she carried electrical tools to an office interview, Hana told him the truth about her uncle, who had trained her as his helper in Detroit until his health failed and family obligations pulled her out before she completed an apprenticeship. The woman introduced herself as Velma Townsend, Malik's chief of staff, and asked whether Hana understood that incomplete training did not make her a licensed electrician. Hana said she understood it better than most people because she knew exactly where her authority ended. "I can recognize danger, make a circuit safe in an emergency, and document what I see," she said. "I cannot certify work, and I do not pretend I can." Velma's face revealed nothing. She moved to Hana's employment history, which included warehouse nights, hotel laundry, cashier work, and several short gaps created by Tate's asthma attacks and unreliable childcare. Hana did not decorate those gaps with inspirational language. She explained what had happened, what she had changed, and why she now needed a daytime job with predictable hours. Malik asked what she would have done if the outlet had only smelled warm and the interviewer had ordered her to sit down. Hana glanced toward the dark half of the office and said, "I would have shut it off anyway, but I would have written down who told me not to." Velma finally looked up from her tablet. Hana left in time to catch the 2:40 bus. The independent electrician arrived before she reached home and found heat damage extending several inches into the wall, along with 3 other outlets in the leasing office that had new plates covering old aluminum connections. The green service tag listed a completed 2-person safety check billed at 6 hours. At 6:05 that evening, Hana stood in the small kitchen she shared with Miss Edith Baldwin, frying eggs while Tate worked fractions at the table. He watched her phone every time it buzzed because he knew an interview had happened, but he also knew not to ask until she was ready. 9-year-olds should not know when hope is expensive, yet Tate had learned. The offer arrived while Hana was turning the eggs. Tenant services assistant full-time, benefits after 60 days, starting Monday. She read the number twice, calculated the inhaler refill, bus fare, and the amount she still owed Miss Edith for groceries, then crouched beside Tate and said, "We can stop stretching the medicine." Tate tried to smile, but relief made his eyes wet before happiness reached them. "Does that mean I can take it when I'm supposed to?" he asked. Hana pulled him against her and said yes, although the first paycheck was 18 days away and the refill was due in 8. At 8:20 the following Monday, before Hana had logged into her computer, a trim, silver-haired man stopped at her desk. Derek Gallagher introduced himself as Director of Facilities and Vendors, 20 years with McBride Restoration, and placed a policy form beside her keyboard. His handshake was polished, his smile almost paternal, and the pen he offered carried the company logo in gold. One clause appeared in bold: all repairs and inspections must be performed exclusively by authorized contracted vendors, and unauthorized work could result in termination. Hana read it twice because the language covered more than repairs. It also covered the kind of outlet examination she had performed during the emergency. She signed because she needed the job, but beside her signature, she wrote the time and copied the clause into the spiral notebook in her purse. Gallagher's smile did not change. "I heard about your demonstration at Sycamore Court," he said. "Quick instincts, but we have licensed partners for that work. You won't need the little tester here." Hana capped his pen and returned it. "I hope I don't," she said. Gallagher walked away, leaving the new policy on her desk and the smell of expensive aftershave behind him. Before lunchtime, the burned outlet from her interview had been replaced by an independent contractor, but the false Pike service tag had disappeared from the panel. The first 2 weeks nearly broke Hana, not because the work was heavy, but because every ordinary task had a vocabulary she had never been paid to learn. Purchase orders vanished into vendor portals. 3 software systems disagreed about unit numbers, and on her second day, she sent a maintenance schedule to every property manager in the company instead of one. She recorded each mistake in her spiral notebook, dated it, and wrote what she would do differently next time. Her uncle Terry Robertson had taught her that habit while she held flashlights for him in Detroit basements. "If you did not write it down, you are asking fear to remember for you," he used to say. Hana had spent 18 months helping him replace devices, pull permits, and document corrections before his kidneys failed, but she had never completed the classroom hours required to move beyond helper work. She made 11 mistakes during her first week and 6 during the second. At night, she studied tenant software on her cracked phone at Miss Edith's kitchen table, then woke before dawn to pack Tate's lunch and listen for the slight whistle that meant his breathing had tightened overnight. Every improvement at work cost sleep at home, and Tate noticed even when Hana said nothing. On her 6th workday, the pharmacy called while she was covering the front desk. Tate's refill would be ready the next afternoon, but the discount she expected no longer applied, leaving $94 due 3 days before she had money to pay it. Hana stepped into the hallway and asked whether the pharmacist could split the prescription, then turned and found Malik 10 feet away with blueprints under his arm. He did not mention what he had heard until closing time. At 6, he placed a printed payroll advance form on her desk and explained that the amount would be deducted from her first check. Hana started to refuse, but Malik said, "It is not charity, and it does not create a debt to me. It is your earned wages moved forward because payroll timing should not decide whether your son breathes." Hana read every line, confirmed the deduction date with payroll herself, and accepted only the exact pharmacy amount. She wrote $94 under owed in her notebook and asked why he was making an exception for someone he barely knew. Malik looked toward the elevators, where a bronze plaque named the Maeve Davies Community Room. Maeve had been his mother, he explained, and Davies was the name she kept after Malik's father disappeared. They had lived outside Macon in a third-floor apartment where the hallway lights dimmed every night and the bedroom outlet sparked whenever rain found the exterior wall. She submitted 11 written complaints, kept every carbon copy, and received 11 stamps that proved the landlord had opened the envelopes. Malik was 15 when an electrical fault started inside that bedroom wall during a school event. Smoke reached Maeve before the flames became visible, and the landlord later argued that no one had understood the complaints were urgent. Malik built his company around buying neglected properties and correcting the failures that powerful owners had learned to call ordinary. "That is the mission statement nobody reads," he said. "You smelled what everyone else had normalized." Hana thanked him for the advance, but corrected one thing before he left. "I smelled it because somebody taught me. That does not make every decision I make here right." 2 days later, Velma rounded the copy room corner and stopped before Hana noticed her. Rahul Davidson from accounting was leaning over Hana's desk with a petty cash envelope, explaining that everyone entered $40 for the $28 courier run because the difference bought coffee and nobody audited small slips. Hana wrote $28 and returned the 12. "I sign my name to what happened," she said. Rahul rolled his eyes and called her painfully literal before walking away. Velma said nothing, but an hour later she emailed Hana a training folder with one line: "Start with Module 3. The others were written by people who enjoy meetings." The first invoice that troubled Hana arrived the following Monday. 4 days earlier, she had delivered lease packets to the Fairground Street property and watched a Pike electrical van pull in at 9:12 with 2 workers and 1 ladder. The same men loaded the same ladder and left at 9:53, and Hana had recorded the times automatically because observation had once been part of her trade. The invoice approved by Gallagher claimed emergency panel service performed by 2 technicians for 8 hours at $140 per hour, plus materials. The total was $2,240, and the work description contained no serial numbers, photographs, or material list. Hana compared the invoice to her notebook until the 41 minutes she had seen felt heavier than the 8 hours typed on paper. She did not accuse anyone. She filed the document where it belonged, copied the invoice number into her notebook, and checked whether travel time or a second location might explain the difference. Nothing in the file did, but one questionable bill was not proof of fraud. It was only a reason to pay attention. That evening, Tate found her rewriting the entry onto a clean page. He asked why she was doing homework after getting a job, and Hana told him grown-ups sometimes wrote down details because details disappeared when people became frightened. Tate looked toward the inhaler on the table and said, "Please do not get fired for somebody else's math." Hana promised she would be careful. She did not promise she would stop looking because the promise would have been false. The following morning, she learned that Pike Electrical had received every electrical contract McBride Restoration had issued during the past 6 years. Ida Sutherland lived in Unit 214 at Sycamore Court and had called tenant services 9 times about an outlet that clicked when her box fan ran. She was one of 11 legacy tenants still occupying the East Wing, while 27 renovated apartments waited for the city inspection that would allow new leases. Rahul told Hana the complaint was closed because Pike had completed full aluminum wiring remediation in May. The invoice appeared in the vendor archive within minutes. It claimed that all 38 East Wing units had received approved Alumicon connectors, copper pigtails at every device, antioxidant preparation where required, and torque verification by licensed electricians. The amount was $46,800, approved by Derek Gallagher, with a completion sheet signed by Aaron Pike. Hana was scheduled to deliver tenant notices at Sycamore Court that Thursday. Ida opened her door before Hana knocked and led her directly to the living room, where a white wall plate looked newer than the paint around it. "They put that pretty square on there and called me fixed," Ida said. "The noise came back the same night." The policy Hana had signed sat clearly in her memory. She could have documented Ida's statement, submitted another ticket, and left the physical inspection to the vendor accused of doing the work. Instead, she made the choice that would later give Gallagher a partial truth to use against her. Hana shut off the circuit, verified the outlet was dead, removed the wall plate, and eased the device forward while Ida watched. There was no Alumicon connector, no copper pigtail, and no evidence of the build remediation. The original aluminum conductor remained pushed into a copper-only receptacle, while the only new item was the $4 white plate covering it. Hana photographed the unit number, the untouched connection, and the device markings, then returned everything exactly as she found it. She told Ida not to use the box fan on that wall and submitted an urgent request for an independent inspection without mentioning her own unauthorized look. That omission became Hannah's damaging mistake because she believed imperfect secrecy would protect the larger truth until she could prove it. At Miss Edith's table that night, she logged the photographs, their timestamps, the invoice number, and the policy she had violated. She emailed copies to 2 personal accounts and printed one set at the public library the next morning. Paper was memory, but only if the person controlling the filing cabinet could not remove it. Over the next 2 weeks, Hana found legitimate reasons to return to Sycamore Court. She delivered a lease amendment to Unit 209, smoke detector batteries to Unit 226, and an accessibility form to Unit 231. In each apartment, the tenant reported similar heat, clicking, or intermittent power, and in each one, Hana repeated the same unauthorized examination. Every outlet told the same story. Bright new plates covered old devices, direct aluminum terminations, and no trace of the connectors listed on the invoice. Hana now had 4 units, but 4 inspections performed by an unlicensed employee in violation of policy could still be dismissed as mishandled samples or altered photographs. She needed independent verification and lawful access, yet reporting the suspicion through normal facilities channels would send it to Gallagher, while calling Malik too early could look like the favored new employee bypassing management after accepting a special payroll advance. Hana told herself she was waiting until the evidence was airtight, though part of her was also avoiding the humiliation of being wrong in front of the man who had believed in her. The whisper campaign began before she chose a path. Someone learned that Malik had authorized her payroll advance, and by mid-June, the story had grown from $94 of early wages into private checks, special treatment, and a relationship no one could name directly because implication worked better. Conversation stopped when Hana entered the break room, and property managers who had never spoken to her suddenly studied her clothes. Rahul, who had invited her to pad a petty cash slip, stopped saying good morning. One afternoon, he asked whether Tate's medicine was still being handled upstairs, then smiled as though he had made a harmless joke. Hana answered that payroll had deducted every dollar and showed him the receipt, but gossip did not care about documentation when its purpose was punishment. Velma witnessed that refusal from the copy room doorway. She later asked payroll for the advance form, confirmed the deduction, and filed a quiet correction with human resources, but she did not make a public defense Hana had not requested. Instead, she placed 2 sandwiches on Hana's desk at lunch and ate one beside her without discussing the whispers. The city notice arrived on the final Tuesday of June. Inspectors would review Sycamore Court on July 21st, including the renovated East Wing, and approval would allow the 27 empty units to be leased. Malik announced the date as the last gate before families could move into homes he believed were safe. An inspector might open random devices and discover the fraud. An overbooked inspector might review the paid invoices, examine the panel, test a few outlets, and accept new plates as visible evidence of completed work. Hana had watched careful people miss hidden failures before, especially when paperwork reassured them that another professional had already looked. 25 days remained. She created a private timeline with the inspection date at the top, the 4 photographed units beneath it, and the fairground invoice at the bottom. Her plan was to document enough occupied and vacant units to establish a pattern, then request an independent licensed inspection before the city walkthrough. Tate noticed the photographs while reaching for colored pencils in her bag. He stared at the blackened device and asked whether it could make a fire like the one Malik's mother had died in. Hana said it could, then regretted telling him when his face changed. "Then tell Malik," Tate said. "I will," Hana answered, "when I can make sure the right person gets removed instead of me." Tate did not understand corporate evidence, but he understood the possibility of losing their new stability, and that night he moved his inhaler beside his bed without being reminded. Atlanta entered July under a heat advisory, and every occupied apartment at Sycamore Court pushed fans or window units against wiring billed as remediated. Hana had documented 7 more devices, including 2 in vacant units accessed during approved move-in checks, but she still lacked a licensed professional willing to verify what her photographs showed. The independent electrician she called privately would inspect only with the owner's written permission, which would alert Gallagher before she had a protected route to Malik. On Thursday afternoon, the East Wing lights dimmed while Hana was delivering utility forms. They surged once, and the smell reached her from the second floor. No longer the faint sweetness of warming insulation, but the metallic odor that meant heat had already damaged something. She followed a low frying sound to Unit 231. The tenant opened the door, wearing headphones, annoyed by her pounding. Behind him, haze curled above the outlet serving his window unit, and paint blistered in a widening oval over the plate. Hana ordered him into the hallway, killed power to the entire second-floor East Wing circuit at the corridor panel, and called 911 before pulling the alarm. She moved door to door while 11 households emptied into the parking lot. Ida appeared in slippers, carrying a purse and a frame photograph, while another tenant tried to return for medication until Hana and the site superintendent stopped him. By the time firefighters opened the wall, the wire insulation had burned back 8 inches, and the face of the stud was blackened. The captain said another 20 minutes under load might have carried fire into the ceiling void. He also noted that the failed device had no aluminum to copper remediation and instructed management to keep the affected circuits de-energized until a licensed electrician examined the wing. No one was injured, but 11 households spent the evening outside while emergency lodging was arranged. Malik arrived after 6 with his tie missing and his hands visibly unsteady. He stood inside Unit 231 staring at the opened wall, the failed receptacle, and the old aluminum conductor that should have ended in the connectors listed on the paid invoice. For a moment, Hana did not see a founder. She saw the 15-year-old boy who had found 11 ignored complaints in his mother's dresser. "We paid for this," he said. "I approved a capital report that said this entire wing was remediated." Hana reached for her notebook, finally ready to show him the pattern. But Derek Gallagher entered with Aaron Pike and an explanation prepared before either man inspected the wall. Gallagher called the event tenant overload, noting that the circuit had carried a window unit, television, game console, and small refrigerator during extreme heat. That part was true. The tenant had placed a heavy load on the circuit. Gallagher used the truth to imply that proper remediation could not have prevented the failure, though approved connectors and corrected terminations were precisely what the invoice claimed had been installed. Pike promised to re-inspect the entire East Wing before July 21st at his company's expense. Gallagher praised Hana publicly for noticing the danger, thanked the firefighters, and turned her intervention into fortunate amateur instinct rather than evidence of a failed contract. He ended by reminding everyone that only licensed vendors could certify electrical conditions. Malik told Hana to meet him the next morning, but investor meetings consumed Friday and an emergency financing call took Monday. Velma rescheduled twice, then warned that Gallagher had requested Hana's onboarding file, property access history, and the incident report identifying who opened the corridor panel. The policy violation Hana had hidden was no longer hidden. The fire changed Hana's objective. She was no longer trying only to prove inflated invoices. She needed to prevent dangerous apartments from passing inspection, even if protecting them required admitting that she had broken company policy. She also understood that waiting for perfect evidence had allowed the risk to continue until a wall nearly burned. At home, Tate watched a local news clip showing residents outside Sycamore Court. The report did not name Hana, but he recognized her blouse in the background and asked whether she had been inside when the smoke started. When she said yes, he pushed his dinner away. "You said you were being careful," he told her. "I was careful with the fire," Hana said. "I was not careful with us." Tate asked whether she could lose the job, and Hana admitted she could. His eyes filled, not with admiration but anger, because children experience principles through the bills they might disturb. "Why do you always have to fix what other people break?" he asked. Hana started to answer with Terry's lessons, then stopped because Tate had not asked for a family motto. "Because people were living behind those walls," she said, "but I should have told you what I was risking before the risk came home." Tate carried his plate to the sink without forgiving her. That silence followed Hana back to Sycamore the next day, where Pike's promised re-inspection consisted of 2 workers entering the building with clipboards and leaving before noon. Hana logged their arrival and departure, but did not follow them into a single unit. She had spent weeks collecting evidence like a woman who expected a powerful person to ask the right question. No one was going to ask unless she built a process they could not quietly reroute. To do that, she needed the vendor system beneath Pike, not merely more photographs of the damage it left behind. Hana's badge allowed her to organize vendor records, and the records were careless because no one had challenged them in years. Pike Electrical had won every electrical package issued by McBride Restoration across 19 properties. Each folder contained 3 bids, but the losing proposals repeatedly used the same font, margins, line spacing, and the same misspelling of conduit as conduit. The prices formed a pattern as neat as stairs. Pike's bid was always lowest by 4 to 7%, while the other two were high enough to establish competition, but never realistic enough to win. Hana photographed only files she was assigned to handle and recorded the path, date, and reason for access beside every image. What the files did not show was why Gallagher had accepted obvious ghost bids. The answer surfaced during the company's summer vendor lunch, where Hana managed check-in while contractors drank beneath a white tent. Aaron Pike arrived loud, stayed near the bar, and eventually complained to Gallagher within Hana's hearing. 22 points for 6 years, Derek, and I never blinked, Pike said. Redoing Sycamore before inspection comes out of my side, not yours. Gallagher gripped his elbow and told him to eat something. Hana recorded the exact words, time, and positions in her notebook from the restroom 2 minutes later. She understood 22 points as a percentage, but the remark remained ambiguous. It could describe Pike's profit margin, a split with Gallagher, or a private calculation unrelated to fraud. Hana needed financial proof, independent testimony, or an admission that no sober executive would volunteer. Gallagher approached her before the lunch ended. He straightened the name tags she had already aligned and said he admired people who noticed details. Some rise because of it, he said. Others discover that being noticed back feels different, especially when their file contains a personal advance, unauthorized inspections, and property visits outside their job. Hana asked whether he was threatening her. Gallagher smiled and said he was advising an employee whose intentions might be misread. Companies survive because process matters more than personal certainty, he added, a principle he would later repeat when he believed process belonged to him. That night, Hana told Miss Edith everything except the photograph's exact location. Miss Edith advised her to take the notebook directly to Malik, but Hana still feared firing too early and watching Gallagher dismiss the evidence as an unlicensed employee's obsession. She decided to wait only long enough to document Pike's promised reinspection and request a protected review through Velma. The delay cost her. On Wednesday, her desk drawers sat half an inch differently from where she left them, though nothing appeared missing. On Thursday, facilities performed an unannounced equipment inventory and confirmed that every employee with field access had a signature specimen and badge number on file. Velma passed Hana's desk Friday and dropped a folded sticky note beside her keyboard. "Watch your 6," it read. Hana looked up, but Velma was already entering the elevator and offered no explanation that Gallagher could report as interference. At home, Tate found Hana sliding the notebook inside her pillowcase. He asked whether bad people were coming to their apartment, and she told him no, though she no longer trusted the word. Tate said he wanted her to quit before she became the next person blamed for a fire. Hana said quitting would not remove the old wiring. Tate answered, "It would keep you here," then shut his bedroom door. His fear exposed the part of Hana's plan she had refused to count. Proving the truth could still injure the person she was trying to protect. Monday morning, a thermal imaging camera valued at $2,300 was reported missing from the facility's storage room. The electronic checkout record contained no entry under Hana's badge, but the handwritten backup log showed the camera released Thursday at 2:14 p.m. under H. Marks. Gallagher requested an immediate misconduct hearing before anyone compared the two systems. The company handled Hana's suspension with careful courtesy. Human Resources provided water, Gallagher expressed regret, and the allegations appeared in numbered order as though formatting made them neutral. The camera was missing, the paper log carried her name. She had accessed Sycamore's electrical panel, and 11 site visits exceeded what Gallagher described as the needs of an office assistant. Hana admitted opening the panel during the fire and admitted examining outlets without authorization before it. She denied taking the camera and explained that she had been delivering 14 signed lease addenda at Fairground Street at 2:14 Thursday. The Human Resources manager wrote down the statement but said the company would need time to verify it. Gallagher did not call her a thief. He said the evidence created a pattern that could not be ignored, then offered the same partial truth he had always used. Policies existed, so personal conviction did not replace qualified procedure. Hana was suspended without pay until the vendor committee and human resources completed their review. Her badge made a small click when she placed it on the conference table. She walked through the bullpen while coworkers studied their screens, made it one block beyond the building, and sat down inside a bus shelter because her knees would no longer hold her. The worst part was not the lie, but the fluency with which true facts had been arranged around it. Malik called twice. Hana let both calls end because she could not bear either possibility, that he believed Gallagher or that he would override the process and prove every rumor about favoritism. A founder's rescue might restore her paycheck while destroying her credibility and leaving Gallagher's vendor system intact. At home, Tate had already heard because the school called Hana's disconnected office extension when his breathing tightened during recess. Miss Edith picked him up, and he sat at the kitchen table with his inhaler beside him when Hana arrived. He looked frightened, angry, and embarrassed by both feelings. "Did you steal it?" he asked. Hana said no. "Are they going to say you did anyway?" he asked, and Hana could not promise they would not. Tate whispered that he wished she had left the walls alone, then immediately apologized as if fear itself were disloyal. Hana sat beside him and accepted the sentence instead of correcting it. She said she had hidden the inspections from the company because she wanted perfect proof before asking for help, and that secrecy had given Gallagher facts he could shape. "The danger was real," she said, "but being right did not make every choice I made right." Tate asked whether that meant she deserved to lose her job. "No," Hana said. "It means I have to tell the whole truth, including the part that makes me look bad, or I am doing what he did with the paperwork." Tate did not forgive the risk, but he moved his chair closer. That night, Hana drafted a resignation letter. She thanked Malik for the opportunity and asked him to open the East Wing walls before families moved in, then placed the letter beside her notebook. The words sounded like every exhausted adult who had ever told her that survival required finding another road around power. Terry had answered that belief once while showing 12-year-old Hana a service panel. City Hall was only another system, he said. Yelling at the wall accomplished nothing until you found where the wall was fed from. Hana opened her notebook and read the accusations as a hostile reviewer would, searching for the system Gallagher could not control. The camera entry was handwritten, but storage access had required badge entry since March. Someone had written H. Marks after entering with either Hana's badge or a facility's master credential. Hana could not obtain the controller log, but Velma could, and Gallagher's request for immediate discipline suggested he expected no one to compare the two records. Hana emailed Velma a precise request. She asked for storage door access between 1:45 and 2:30 Thursday, her own badge history at Fairground, the company vehicle assignment for Gallagher, and preservation of security video before automatic deletion. She attached no accusations, only the reason each record could independently test the camera claim. The doorbell rang at 9:40. Malik stood in Miss Edith's hallway and raised one hand before Hana could refuse him. "I am not here to reverse the suspension," he said. "I know what that would do to you," and Velma made sure I understood it twice. The formal review would meet Friday with Human Resources, the vendor committee, Velma, Malik, and Gallagher. Hana had the right to appear, present records, admit violations, and request independent verification. Malik could guarantee only the room and a chair that did not belong to Gallagher. "My mother filed 11 complaints and never received the room," Malik said. "Take it, but do not take it from me." Hana looked at the resignation letter, the notebook, and Tate standing quietly in the kitchen doorway. "Friday," she said. "I will need my photographs printed from the original files, not screenshots, and I want the metadata preserved." Malik nodded. Hana added, "Do not sit beside me in there. Sit where you always sit, and make me prove it." The review convened Friday at 10 in the fourth floor boardroom. Human Resources sat opposite two vendor committee members. Velma placed her tablet beside a stack of preserved records. Malik occupied the chair at the head of the table, and Gallagher opened a leather folio midway down. Aaron Pike waited in a separate conference room because Hana had requested that witnesses not hear one another's answers. Gallagher spoke first with the calm reluctance of a man protecting the company from personal conflict. He described the missing camera, Hana's unauthorized electrical activity, and property visits that exceeded her assigned duties. He acknowledged that she might have acted from sincere concern, but argued that intention could not excuse unlicensed inspections or missing equipment. Hana did not begin with the fraud. "I opened electrical devices in 7 units without authorization," she said. "I believed waiting for stronger proof would protect the tenants and my job, but hiding those inspections violated policy and gave this company an incomplete record. If the board determines that deserves a written warning, I will sign it." Gallagher looked briefly surprised. Hana continued, "I did not take the thermal camera, and my policy violation cannot make a false invoice true. I will address the camera first because someone used it to prevent this room from discussing the walls." Velma displayed the storage controller log. At 2:11 Thursday, the facility's master credential FM1 opened the equipment room, while Hana's badge showed no access to headquarters after 12:46. Her credential entered Fairground Street at 1:58 and left at 3:20, matching 14 tenant addenda signed during that period. FM1 was assigned to Gallagher's office. Gallagher responded that supervisors sometimes lent the credential to facilities staff during inventory work, which was possible, and prevented the log from proving who physically carried it. Hana agreed before he could accuse her of overstating the record. "The log does not prove Mr. Gallagher entered," she said. "It proves I did not, and it proves the handwritten H. Marks entry was created after someone entered under facilities authority." She requested preservation of the company SUV assigned to Gallagher because its equipment compartment had not yet been inventoried, but she did not ask the committee to decide who planted the camera without finding it. Then Hana placed a sealed evidence sleeve on the table containing the failed receptacle removed from Unit 231 by the fire department. Beside it, she set an unopened Alumicon connector and a short copper pigtail supplied by the independent licensed electrician who had corrected the leasing office. The difference required no technical imagination. She introduced invoice 20447, which claimed approved connectors and copper pigtails had been installed at every East Wing device. She showed photographs from 7 units, original file metadata, library print receipts, and automated email headers proving that the images had existed on the dates recorded. Each photograph displayed an old aluminum conductor attached directly to a copper-only device behind a new plate. Gallagher challenged the photographs because Hana had moved the devices herself. He suggested she might have photographed outlets outside Pike's completed scope, misunderstood phased work, or disturbed compliant connections before taking the images. Those possibilities were why, Hana said, she was not asking the board to accept her photographs as final proof. "I am asking you to choose units I never entered," she said. "Generate the numbers from the full roster, send an electrician with no relationship to Pike or me, and open the walls while everyone watches. If the billed connectors are present, uphold my suspension and refer my unauthorized inspections for discipline." The committee generated 3 unit numbers using a random number function displayed on the boardroom screen. 1 belonged to a legacy tenant, and 2 were empty renovated apartments Hana had never visited. Malik called the independent electrical firm already on standby, then recessed the hearing and moved it to Sycamore Court. Gallagher objected that no committee should turn an employment review into a construction audit. Malik answered that the employment allegation depended on whether Hana had invented the danger she claimed motivated her conduct. Gallagher joined the group because leaving before verification would have looked worse than staying. At Sycamore, the independent electrician began with vacant Unit 238. The new white plate came off cleanly, revealing the original copper-only receptacle and aluminum conductor with no connector or pigtail. Gallagher said a scope revision might have excluded that line, though no revision appeared in the contract file. The second selection was Unit 205, occupied by a tenant who had moved into the building before renovation. Again, no connector existed behind the plate. The electrician documented elevated heat discoloration and explained that while the circuit was not failing at that moment, the termination did not match the invoiced remediation. Gallagher argued that Pike had been hired to prioritize renovated vacancies, not legacy units. Hana opened the contract appendix and pointed to the line identifying 38 East Wing units, occupied and vacant, with no exclusions. She did not raise her voice. She only asked the committee to compare the wall with the document Gallagher had approved. The third selection was vacant Unit 244. Aaron Pike had been brought to the property separately and was standing with counsel near the leasing office when the electrician removed the plate. The same untouched connection waited behind it, and the electrician found no evidence that an approved connector had ever occupied the box. Pike claimed a subcontractor must have substituted methods without his knowledge. Gallagher said Pike had kept projects moving through supply shortages, labor gaps, and impossible budgets for 6 years, and that bundled pricing across 19 properties could make individual invoices look inaccurate when the portfolio remained profitable. For the first time, his defense revealed the justification beneath the scheme. He believed growth, occupancy, and predictable vendors mattered more than whether each paid correction reached each wall. Hana answered that portfolio efficiency could explain a pricing choice, but not fabricated losing bids or non-existent safety work. She produced the paired proposals containing identical formatting and the repeated condiet misspelling, then described Pike's statement about 22 points. Gallagher called the remark bar talk and said it proved nothing about him. By itself, it does not, Hana said. Neither did my first photograph. The 41-minute service call billed as 8 hours, or the missing connectors in one apartment. The question is what the records become when independent walls repeat them. The committee questioned Pike separately. He denied kickbacks and characterized 22 points as his target margin, but he could not explain why 2 supposed competitors used templates matching internal Pike files later obtained through counsel. He also could not produce technician notes, connector lot numbers, unit checklists, or photographs supporting the $46,800 completion sheet. The review did not end with an applause line or an immediate criminal judgment. Human Resources cleared Hana of the camera allegation based on her badge history and suspended that portion of the case pending recovery of the equipment. The board placed Gallagher on administrative leave, froze Pike payments, postponed the city inspection, and authorized a full independent audit of all 19 properties. Hana received a written warning for unauthorized inspections, paired with back pay for the unpaid suspension because the theft allegation had not been supported. She signed the warning after adding a statement that emergency shutdowns and good faith safety reporting required a protected escalation route. The committee voted to revise the policy rather than pretend her violation and the company's failure were the same thing. 2 days later, security staff inventoried the company SUV assigned exclusively to Gallagher before transferring it to an interim director. The thermal camera, serial ending 884, was sealed inside the locked rear equipment compartment beneath outdated inspection binders. Gallagher denied placing it there and communicated through counsel, but the recovery removed the last basis for accusing Hana. The outside audit found the same pattern at 12 additional McBride properties: new plates, incomplete remediation, duplicated bid templates, inflated labor, and payments unsupported by unit-level records. Gallagher was terminated for cause, while the company referred the findings to its insurer, outside counsel, licensing authorities, and law enforcement without promising outcomes it could not control. Pike's contracts were canceled, and civil recovery began through claims and negotiated repayment. Malik personally notified the city that Sycamore would not be ready for inspection. Delaying 27 leases cost the company an entire season of revenue, but the 11 occupied households received temporary cooling equipment, hotel options during circuit shutdowns, and daily updates. A new licensed crew corrected every termination using approved connectors and copper pigtails under independent verification. Hana returned to her desk after 3 weeks, not as the woman Malik had rescued, but as the employee whose evidence had survived challenge. The thermal camera waited there with a sticky note from Velma. Recovered, logged, and not available for casual borrowing. Hana laughed once, then placed the note inside her spiral notebook beside the policy warning she had earned. Malik's meeting invitation carried one word in the subject line: stay. He offered Hana a new position as resident safety coordinator, responsible for tracking tenant complaints, verifying vendor documentation, and accompanying licensed inspectors rather than performing electrical work herself. The role reported to Velma and the vendor committee, not directly to Malik, and Hana accepted only after the responsibilities, salary, and limits were written clearly. The company also approved tuition through the same education benefit available to every full-time employee. Hana enrolled in evening electrical systems courses at Atlanta Technical College, where modern code books confirmed much of what Terry had taught and corrected the shortcuts experience had allowed him to normalize. She kept his yellow tester beside her textbooks, not as a license she had never earned, but as the beginning of one she now intended to complete. Tate did not celebrate immediately. For several weeks, he checked Hana's face whenever her phone rang and asked whether she was going back to Sycamore after dark. Hana answered every question directly, shared her work schedule, and stopped treating silence as protection. One Tuesday, she showed him the written warning beside the letter clearing the theft accusation. "Both belong in the same story," she said. Tate read only the first few lines before becoming bored, but he understood that his mother had won without pretending she had made no mistakes. Sycamore's postponed inspection took place in October. The city inspector selected 6 outlets from the complete East Wing roster, and an independent electrician opened each device while Hana documented the unit, time, connector, pigtail, and torque record. 6 compliant terminations went back into 6 walls, and the inspector issued approval for the 27 vacant apartments. Ida stopped Hana in the parking lot after the first new families arrived. She announced that her box fan now ran from any outlet she pleased and demanded that the company replace the ugly patch where firefighters had opened Unit 231. Hana wrote the request in front of her, gave her the tracking number, and called 2 days later to confirm the repair date. The vendor audit continued for months, slower and less satisfying than a dramatic verdict. Some money returned through insurance and settlements. Some claims remained disputed, and licensing investigators followed schedules no one at McBride controlled. Malik published the deficiencies to residents, created an anonymous safety channel monitored outside facilities, and required unit-level photographs and random verification before electrical invoices could be paid. Malik attended a resident safety meeting but did not stand beside Hana or introduce her as proof that the company had changed. He sat in the second row while Hana explained the complaint process, showed residents how tracking numbers worked, and answered questions about why inspections had failed. When one tenant asked whether Malik expected forgiveness because he had fired Gallagher, Hana let him answer, and he said ownership meant responsibility for systems he had trusted without checking. Afterward, he thanked Hana for refusing to become a symbol for a company brochure, and she said the best thank you would be funding an independent resident advocate for 1 year. The position appeared in the next budget, selected by a tenant committee and reported directly to the board. For Hana, that mattered more than another speech because the next frightened employee or ignored resident would not need a relationship with a billionaire to reach a room where evidence could be heard. At home, Tate's anger softened through routine rather than one perfect conversation. Hana attended his winter science night, kept her phone in her purse, and listened while he explained a cardboard lung model that wheezed when a straw was pinched. On the bus home, he admitted he had been afraid that telling her to stop meant he cared more about money than the tenants. You cared about keeping your mother, Hana said. That was not wrong. Tate asked whether she would make the same choice again, and Hana said she would report the danger immediately, ask for protected access sooner, and never hide evidence gathering behind the word careful. Brave and smart are supposed to work together, she told him. I was late learning that. In January, Miss Edith brought home a dead table lamp from the church rummage sale. Hana spread a towel across the kitchen table, unplugged the lamp, and placed wire strippers, a screwdriver, and Terry's yellow-nosed tester beside Tate. She explained that they were repairing a cord, not household wiring, and that knowing a limit was part of knowing the work. Tate pointed out that the lamp was already unplugged. Hana asked what mattered more, what they believed or what they could verify. He rolled his eyes with the practiced patience of a 9-year-old, touched the tester to the socket, and watched it remain dark. He stripped the damaged section under Hana's supervision, wrapped the conductor in the correct direction, and tightened the terminal without rushing. When the lamp lit on the first try, Tate raised both fists, then lowered one and looked at his mother. "You wrote down what we changed, right?" he asked. Hana turned the lamp toward the notebook beside her. The page held the date, the damaged cord, the replacement part, and Tate's name written as assistant in letters large enough to occupy 2 lines. His breathing was easy as warm light spread across the kitchen table, and this time the record told the whole truth. The record finally told the whole truth. Comment your thoughts and subscribe to Malrick Coleman for more hard-earned justice.